Welcome back, everyone. So we're here for the final discussion. We've had three very lively panels and an amazing keynote. And yeah, maybe I'll just throw some questions, intuitive, maybe some absurd into the round, and then you can react to them, whichever one touches your fancy. First one is, what can biological systems teach us about technological systems or structures that we found ourselves enmeshed in? How has the pandemic affected the structures of our lives, both tying us more into technologies, but also showing that there's a universe outside of them? Yeah, and as the domesticated Visarum has lost some of its immunity, our Homo sapiens, domesticated by the internet, losing some of our own immunity or ability to reason. So, I don't know if anybody wants to.
Who would like to throw some ideas into the plenum? Maybe we throw the ball over to Roberta.
You're gonna have to summarize the question though, because I don't know which one to answer. I was kind of hoping that other people would say something. Was it about the pandemic? The one about the pandemic?
Yeah. So how has it affected the structures of our life? We've become more kind of enmeshed in technologies on one hand. On the other hand, the whole pandemic has been caused by something that it comes from outside of our culture and outside of our technologies. I mean, a virus that lives in bats suddenly forces us to live indoors for months at a time.
Well, for some of us, it was kind of coming, right? But yeah, I think I don't remember if I said that before we went offline or while we were already offline. But I think that one of the things that happened, if anything, or maybe you need to pay more attention. I don't know, because every person is different, right? But one of the things that I realized is that all the deluge of information and like data and graphs and maps that have become part of our lives, and the misinformation that came with it, and also the failed models that were disseminated, kind of made us more aware of the fact that data are not neutral. And they made us probably more aware of the profound uncertainty that we are facing, and like the fact that science is not what we assume to be, or what other people assume to be, what the popular assumption was, that is like infallible and always having the right answer, etc. So I don't know, like I think that this pandemic just kind of revealed a little bit the behind the stage of things, but I don't know if people perceive that, because I every time I deal with these issues. Sorry, my cat is pushing my but every time I deal with these issues, I actually don't know with quite certainty what, like, people are not in academia or in the arts or in our field think about it, right? Anybody else?
I don't know, Sarah and Danya seem to have a practice that is very much about showing how the internet manipulates us, as well as trying to even explain the internet through workshops and through doing. And maybe it also has to do it, sometimes I feel that it's this kind of belief in technology that the general public has that leads people to be manipulated, given disinformation, go off on tangents. Maybe we call it the fall victim to the white mold of the internet.
Well, as I did mention in the first part, or in our part of the panel, that technology should not be considered without its users. And of course, technology itself cannot help us, cannot save us, and cannot prevent things. And at the same time, it is us, the users, who mainly F things up. So that's sort of important to keep that in mind, considering networks and systems in general.
Yeah, I mean, oh, can you make yourself down? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think that I actually talked about it. I talked about this issue a lot with my students at Kassel during the pandemic. Of course, all of our classes were held over Zoom. How, yeah, you know, one of the things about the pandemic is that it made us all more reliant on technology for communicating and working and socializing than ever before, given that for a while, depending on which part of the world you're in, but I think it touched all parts of the world at some point, you couldn't meet people in person or have any other opportunity to make any contact. So having to be reliant on needing to use, you know, a program like Zoom to get your work done and to socialize, or, you know, social media in general. Yeah, it really, I talked about this with my students just to have them consider, you know, how vulnerable that made us. Imagining that our lives were suddenly being mediated through a handful of digital portals, you know, that we had very, very little control over. So, I mean, I think, yeah, and really it's just that, like, it's, you know, when you're on, you know, it's just not taking for granted, you know, the tools that were filtered down into having to use. It really does end up being just a handful of tools which mediate our social existence and work existence, and you know, how we connect with people. So and just thinking about how, you know, how maybe our social interactions obviously are going to get shaped by these tools. It's just thinking critically about this, and at least being self-aware, because it's hard to know what to do. And that's part of what me and Danya always teach in our workshops. You know, when we teach people how to interact with this networking technology, maybe to reclaim some ownership to some extent, like running your own web server, maybe running your own video chat server. I mean, maybe it feels like not like a drop in the bucket of what one can do to sort of feel some sense of control, or, you know, reclaiming the tools that we use, or at least how our data gets stored or transmitted. But yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic just for me really put that into sharp relief. I just felt so vulnerable and so dependent on these tools.
No, thank you.
I just want to add, I don't know if people can hear me, because I think a lot of people seem frozen. But I just wanted to add to some of the discussions just now and also in the last panel. I think there's an important term like technology literacy or technical literacy that I think is very important. And I think the thing is, I think computers, they're kind of like, you know, the printing press. They're not just sort of a social movement, but they're in fact something that can restructure society and the logic of society. And so the thing is, I think there is a lot of critical perspective and fear towards it, but I think that fear also comes out of misunderstanding. That blind faith also comes out of misunderstanding. I think Ben and I actually, we have a good friend, colleague at our university. He's a chemist. And the thing is, if you talk to scientists, I think they don't actually speak as if it were absolute truth, because I think exactly because they come from a perspective of, they know actually how science works from the inside. And I think that, referencing what Roberta was saying, is that this idea of technoscience literacy is very important in sort of embracing this new era that is coming, regardless of how we feel about it or our fears of it. And I think that, and then I think on the sort of pandemic conversation, that the question is, I think it's also important to, I think I am the only non-Western person in this panel or in this group, and it's very different, because I think that last year when the pandemic was happening, Benjamin and I, we got stuck half the time in America and then half the time in China. And I think what was interesting is it's obvious that he's American and I'm Chinese, and the two countries were at odds with each other throughout this whole time, even now, and to be alienated in different ways, to have almost opposite positions, whichever country we are in, and that relationship to how these two different political systems and geolocations are dealing with, and cultures are dealing with the pandemic, I think is also, I think it's sometimes devastating when you're stuck in between conflict, but also I think that it provides a sort of outside perspective for both of us to try to remember there are other, to not go into a tunnel vision about what is actually happening.
And I'd also like to add something, and I think this is kind of veering off a little bit from what you're talking about, but also just technology in general, and these apps, if it's Zoom or if it's Microsoft Teams or whatever apps that we've been kind of stuck in these boxes. These were all designed and engineered within a corporate, commercialized business setting, right? They weren't, they can talk about all the innovation they want. They can talk about all the different educational, breakout rooms or anything like that they want to talk about as being these fantastic educational and or collaborative spaces, but they were all basically designed around business, right? And these kind of quick telepresence ways of being able to talk to people within a non-pandemic, non-locked down version of the world, right? And so, part of, I think, what's starting to happen is definitely within the education sphere, and actually a different project that it's not related to this, but is related to this in the sense of how do you reimagine education within a virtual realm, right? And it's not this top-down view, and it's not this top-down, let's reimagine a VR room like a lecture hall or a WeWork center. That's not going to work. That's not, how can we actually take educational models or collaborative models or whatever kind of model you want and actually design from the bottom up, right? Because we interact with these technologies in a very different way than we interact with these technologies, or non-technological ways, right? A lecture hall is not the same when you're not actually physically in that lecture hall, right? How do you take notes? How do you interact with team groups? So there's all these other questions there, just using education as an example there, but there's all these other models that we need to look at, and it's not necessarily looking at it in a real world situation anymore, but or a corporate situation, but it's how do we build up from that? And I think that's one of the big things that COVID has exposed within definitely education, if not other other
I-
areas.
I think it's I think what he's referring to is one of it's not quite a art project. It's more of a education and design research project that we're working on in this year to end of next summer, which is creating a VR toolkit for virtual learning that is more intuitive. But I think, and I think what he's saying is the way we're approaching it is, you know, the virtual space or the digital world has its own logic. And I think if we keep trying to, take old models to try to put into new mediums, it will feel a little bit forced or out of place, and it will make us choose one or the other. You know, one possible approach is to look at some of these new models and try to, you know, forget some of the things that we know and to try to learn from them and see what can emerge. Yeah. Did we get cut off?
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Do you find that, well, think about technologies. I was thinking about what Sarah said and what Ben was saying also about education. And I don't know how to put this. So like, okay, so I also teach, and I was talking with some of my students, and the first thing that came out was I have a lot of students who are international students, and last year they were connecting from South Korea, and I still have some students who are stranded somewhere without visa, and they told me that like basically without technology, like they were like, oh, okay, so what would have been without the technologies? And like also thinking about like the way I adapted my own teaching, I actually discovered some fun and new things to deal with younger people, because like we're talking about people who are 20 years younger than me, so there's more than one generational difference, and like the kind of the labor that went into it, and also the satisfaction sometimes that I got from it, thanks to the very mediation of technology, which I also am very critical of. But I'm also thinking about those people who decided, okay, so we have Zoom, it's like yesterday, we're just gonna go in and like lecture for 3 hours, and nothing has changed. We're gonna treat this as if like we were in a classroom. So like I'm wondering like if your experience is, so do you find that there was a lot of adaptation to the technologies, or do you find that like most people just said, okay, whatever, like we have technologies, we're just gonna do as if it was like every day, and we're just gonna apply our own models that are pre-constituted, and we don't have to work for them, we don't have to modify, and we're gonna apply them to these technologies. And if they don't work, we're just gonna say, bad technologies. Long question, sorry.
Well, I would say, and I think this applies to machine learning too, and artwork and a lot of things is, you know, but, you know, when thinking about education, you know, trying to, you know, it's kind of like taking a round peg and trying to push it into a square hole, right? You know, it's not that the technology is necessarily bad, but, you know, there is definitely an adoption that needs to happen, you know. After an hour of trying to, you know, basically broadcast a lecture to 30 Zoom windows or whatever, you know, you lose the students, right? You know, a lot of times, not in every case, and I'm not trying to be totally negative, but, you know, a lot of students have become almost part-time students who are taking online courses, and, you know, there's a whole variance of social things that have happened. There's a whole variance of other things, you know, and you know, when, you know, kind of bringing this back to machine learning, you know, a lot of it, you know, those neural network frameworks, you know, they're you know, some of it is the design of the neural network itself, but some of it is also just what type of data we're putting into it, right? So if it's only consumer data, we're going to get a certain type of result from it, right? Going back to what Jean was talking about earlier with if we can control, and it's an open source model that we can basically manage and massage the way a large democratic group of users could control that model or create that model, you're going to have a very different result than if it's Blackboard or SunGard or whatever corporations out there, or Zoom or whoever who's creating the tool for you to try to teach over, right? And so I think that some of it needs to come from it needs to be kind of really a bottom-up reimagining of what you can use these technologies for. Did they help us? Of course they helped us. We're still holding classes over them, things like that. But we have Zoom fatigue. We have all these other things happening too. And trying to take let's say an active learning model and trying to put that into Zoom it doesn't work well. Trying to do small group activities within a classroom or a flipped classroom doesn't work that well, right? So how can we reimagine that? Just like how can we reimagine how we build the neural networks and how we source the data, right? And who manages that data? Who chooses what data is a yes and a no, right? So.
This is interesting that our final discussion is actually taking the curve towards the educational and the didactic. And I think this is so interesting. I thought I will open up again the discussion about the artworks, but actually this is actually one of my conclusions. They are, let me put it like this, they are so powerful that we end up in a social political debate, or actually in a phenomenological technopolitical realm of our discussion right now. And I find it very interesting to listen to all of you who educate, because this is probably one of the biggest challenges. I also think actually, while we are actually sitting here towards the end of our one-day conference, and we are probably all kind of like tired, and we probably all think like, how long do they want to make us sit here? Maybe I also think there are so many more challenges when I think about the ecological and climate change challenges that we are facing. And I don't want to open up a new discussion, but let me just bring this into the discussion, because I feel this current time of 9th of October in 2021 in Berlin is actually also what we still here have in our back, is actually an election in Germany, and is actually so much discussion not only about social aspects and technology, but also about ecology, or actually so much things that have not been said. And we are actually facing so big challenges. So maybe I just wanted to also like open up the perspective actually coming from technology and the mechanical, the machinic, the technological, the techne, the machen, machine from French medieval etymology. So basically, unless someone wanted to open up a new topic or actually a new discussion, actually, if you allow me, then maybe I kind of like will round up our big, let me call it, big cosmos of debates for the last 7-8 hours, for which we all thank you very, very much to stay with us, to think with us, to contribute, to share knowledge. This is priceless. And not too much to escape our current society, but maybe to metaphorically open it up into a little bit more dystopian, or actually a super future. We might actually wanted to end to bring the debate to the idea of going beyond the technological and thinking about the biological, that as a complex systems maybe might be more predominant, actually, when we think not only in 50 years, but maybe in 5,000 years from now, where might the planet be? So actually, thinking actually beyond, we could say that, and I quote actually the essay with which all this project started actually 2-3 years ago in the book Half-Life, and the essay that Chris and me wrote, Transposed and Beyond, Some Reflections on Machines in the Biological. And I just allow myself to quote the very end. So for all the apocalyptic predictions of possible post-human futures, they will certainly be ones inhabited by biological and geological machines, most likely colonizing and fossilizing the detritus of our technologies. As Lynn Margulis wrote in Symbiotic Planet, I quote, "We cannot put an end to nature. We can only pose a threat to ourselves. The notion that we can destroy our life, including bacteria thriving in the waters of nuclear power plants or boiling hot vents, is ludicrous." End of quote. How refreshing. We set this interesting vanitas against the prognostications of the cosmists or their Silicon Valley progeny, not only when human language has disappeared, but now in the midst of the trouble. The world, including us, is, as always, complex and metabolic. So that's the end of that essay that was written in 2018, goosepimples, because actually we can probably say now we are on level 2.0 with the pandemic, actually. I think our world has become in many thousand times more complex. But with this, we do not want to finish pessimistic. We want to finish absolutely optimistic and very, very grateful. So I can only repeat myself. Vivian, Anna, Alex, Sarah, Dania, Christine, Jean, Benjamin, Kata, Alex, thank you from the bottom of our heart. Roberta, especially thank you for this amazing keynote. I want to thank Tuje and Chris, my wonderful Art Lab partners, for taking me also to the whole project. It was a full joy to go and make this journey, although it brings us to the challenges. We used quite a commercial platform to meet here, and electricity, etc. And a waste of energy was making it possible that we were communicating in the last 7-8 hours. We also want to thank Jana and Madeleine, our team members, who have been supporting and supportive amazingly to make that group exhibition under our shadow happen, including the source books, including communication and setup and logistics, including preps for the conference. Then also we want to thank, and I'd like to turn the camera to see this happen over there. We want to thank Linus Kaufold, Seeberg Embrace, who is actually making the whole technological background and logistics. Otherwise, we would have not been sitting here. Thanks to Tim Deussen, as I said, a good friend, colleague, Art Lab member, photographer, also who actually whose photographs we actually made our introduction into the conference this morning, and we also will put them online on the website. We thank our supporters, where the funding came to also make this possible, the Berlin Senate and the Hauptstadt Kulturfonds. Thank you so very much that we could realize this. And also thank you for the media partners, Art in Berlin and Clot Magazine, who have been writing about us and will be writing about this project. So, and probably I will forget many, many more, but we do not want to sit here probably for another half an hour. So thank you for your endurance. And we recorded all the panels and we will put them in shapes and in bits and edit them and put them online and make them available. That also brings me actually to our web archive that has been since summer. There is a new Art Lab Berlin web archive, and we very thank Alice Canava for this. And so our aim is to actually also archive this conference and make this more available in the future. And of course, we will find also ways to continue our discussions, because what I just thought is in all the panel discussions, I always had the feeling it was a beginning of something. So to be continued in a way. Tomorrow is the last exhibition day. So for all being here in Berlin or near or far, join us. We will be there between 2 and 6 p.m. CET. Or you can maybe also virtually join us and we can walk around with you. We have to deconstruct the show on Monday, so whoever wants to see it in Berlin, to come tomorrow. Is there anything that I forgot? Okay, so let's not be too dystopian. Most of all, also, thank you for to the audience that you bared with us, stayed with us and joined our discussion, and thank you for all the comments and questions, and the discussions will all only continue. This is only a start. So we kind of will go offline here in the Zoom. Maybe for a couple of minutes we can stay here. I think we will say goodbye to the audience and hope to meet you soon, and stay safe and healthy.